Imagine a patient in like an acute psychological crisis. We are talking about someone who is completely unreachable by traditional therapy.
Right, maybe they are catatonic or just trapped in a severe dissociative state.
Exactly. Someone who just cannot string together the cognitive function you need to even participate in a standard psychological intervention.
Yeah, they are just offline, essentially.
Right. So now imagine a loved one stepping in and initiating this remote telepathic transmission of energy that just bypasses the patient's conscious mind entirely.
Wow.
I know, right? Attempting to re-regulate their nervous system and just bring them back to a baseline of reality without them even actively participating. I mean, it sounds like complete science
It
fiction.
really does. It sounds like something out of a movie.
But today, we are analyzing the frameworks of a practitioner who claims this exact intervention is not only possible, but actually highly routine.
Yeah, we are dissecting a very specific, highly technical piece of source material today. We have a transcript from a practitioner known as Osman, the Blind Yogi.
And what makes this text so compelling is that it operates at this absolute intersection of ancient yogic science and, well, acute critical care.
Exactly. He is presenting this methodology for resolving deep-seated psychological problems and subconscious trauma. But he is doing so with claims that just completely challenge the foundational boundaries of how we define medical intervention.
Right, and we really have to look closely at the mechanics he is proposing here. Because if his framework holds up, I mean, it completely redefines the architecture of the human mind.
It really does. It shifts everything.
That is the core of our analysis today. We are going straight into the mechanics of Osman's claims. We will examine the physiological realities of what he calls the onion of trauma.
The onion metaphor is fascinating, yeah.
It is, and we will dissect his assertion of a 90% resolution rate for psychological blockages. Plus, we need to unpack the precise energetic pathways he claims to utilize to just, bypass conscious resistance altogether.
And we also need to analyze his strict insistence on collaborating with the allopathic medical establishment, especially regarding pharmacology.
Yes, which is a huge twist. Okay, let's unpack this. Let's start with the practitioner himself, because the specific credentials Osman establishes in the opening lines of this transcript, they essentially dictate the entire theoretical framework we are about to explore.
Yeah, the language he uses to introduce himself is highly, highly calculated. He states, I am a master-level energy healer with telepathic capabilities, specializing in critical care recovery and terminal illnesses.
Which is just a wild combination of words.
Right.
Mhm.
He then notes that he is an advanced-level yoga and meditation teacher, referencing his platform, yogawellness786.com. But we need to isolate the friction between those terms.
Yeah, the friction is massive. I mean, in our current healthcare paradigm, the categorization of critical care and terminal illness is firmly locked inside the domain of high-stakes acute allopathic medicine.
Absolutely. We associate those terms with intensive care units, advanced pharmacology, immediate physical intervention.
Okay. Right, doctors with defibrillators and IVs.
Exactly. So to claim a specialization in those exact areas using telepathic capabilities and energy healing, it forces a collision between two fundamentally different models of human biology.
I have to push back on the viability of blending those spaces so seamlessly, though. Claiming telepathic capabilities in the context of critical care is just an enormous leap.
It is a massive leap.
Because in the allopathic model, if a patient's organs are failing or their psychological state has entirely collapsed, the intervention is inherently physical and localized. The physician literally must be in the room, or the medication must be in the bloodstream.
Right. It is a mechanistic view of the body.
Exactly. But Osman is proposing a non-local intervention. He is suggesting that the human biofield can be manipulated to arrest a critical crisis without physical proximity or standard pharmacological tools. Mechanistically, how is he even justifying that leap?
Well, to understand his justification, we really have to look at how he defines the human organism in the first place. The allopathic model treats the body as a complex biochemical machine.
Right.
If the machine breaks, you introduce a chemical or surgical agent to repair the mechanism. But Osman's framework relies on the premise that the biochemical machine is actually subordinate to an underlying energetic architecture.
Like a blueprint underneath the physical stuff.
Exactly, a biofield or subtle energy body. So when he claims telepathic capabilities, he isn't talking about reading thoughts like some kind of parlor trick.
Right. It isn't like guessing what number you were thinking of.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
In the context of the yogic sciences he references, telepathy involves a highly cultivated resonance. It suggests that a practitioner who has achieved a certain level of energetic density and focus, can actually entrain the destabilized biofield of a critical care patient.
And train it, like forcing it to match a rhythm.
Yeah, much like a powerful tuning fork, forcing a smaller vibrating object into matching its frequency.
Oh, wow. Okay, so he views the critical care crisis, whether it is psychological or physiological, as an extreme state of energetic dissonance.
Yes.
And the telepathic intervention is essentially a forced frequency correction.
Precisely. And this is why his claim of being a master-level healer is structurally necessary for the rest of his transcript.
Because he needs to be the bigger tuning fork.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If you are dealing with a terminal illness or a profound psychological collapse, the degree of energetic dissonance is massive. A casual meditative practice just won't override it.
Right, sitting for 10 minutes on an app isn't going to fix it.
No, it requires a practitioner capable of generating an overwhelming, highly coherent, energetic signal.
And we should mention, he has the reps to back up that claim of mastery, right?
Oh, absolutely. He cites over 50 years of continuous, rigorous practice. We are talking up to 18 hours of daily practice at times. He even achieved his first state of Samadhi by the age of 19.
Which is just incredible discipline. And there's a really crucial piece of context here about Osman that makes his whole approach to this even more fascinating. He has actually been permanently blind since May 2023.
Right, which adds a whole different dimension to his work.
Yeah, because he had normal eyesight for most of his life prior to that. So he retains these incredibly vivid visual memories and sensory frames of reference.
Which you can hear in his teaching.
Exactly. In his videos, he describes environments and techniques with the precise detail of someone who has known sight. He translates that past visual knowledge into his current teachings, which makes his explanations of these invisible energetic concepts surprisingly visual and concrete.
That is a great point. He is essentially establishing that his interventions occur at the substrate level of reality, right, below the threshold of physical chemistry, aiming to correct the energetic blueprint so that the physical body can subsequently repair itself.
It reminds me of the conversations you hear on platforms like The Diary of a CEO, where they talk so much about human performance and biological optimization.
Oh yeah, constantly.
But Osman is taking those concepts of stress adaptation and energy management to an absolute extreme.
He is. If you look at Deepak Chopra's work on quantum healing or mind-body medicine, Chopra talks a lot about consciousness-driven biology. Osman is essentially taking that theoretical quantum framework and applying it directly to the ICU.
Right. When you look at your own protocols for mental resilience or physical health, you are likely balancing therapy, nutritional biochemistry, and maybe pharmacology.
Sure.
Osman is asking for a complete paradigm shift. He is demanding that we make room for a completely non-local, energetic intervention at the highest stakes imaginable.
It is a lot to ask of a modern, scientifically minded person.
It is. But if we accept the premise that he is operating on this substrate level, how does he apply that to the specific architecture of psychological trauma? Because the transcript immediately pivots from his critical care credentials to the structure of deep-seated subconscious problems.
Right. And he provides a very specific structural view of trauma here. And he is highly critical of the modern expectation for rapid relief.
Oh, he really is.
Osman states that yoga and meditation are highly acute tools for resolving these subconscious problems, but he insists, point blank, it is not a magic pill.
No quick fixes.
None. He uses this mechanical metaphor describing a deep-rooted psychological problem as being like an onion with many layers to it. He argues that you cannot simply extract the entire problem at once, stating explicitly that doing so will be dangerous.
And we really need to unpack the physiology behind that danger, because that word, dangerous, is what really stands out to me.
Yeah, it is a strong word to use for healing.
Exactly. Our entire therapeutic model is built on the pursuit of relief. If a patient is suffering from a debilitating subconscious trauma, the instinct is to eradicate it as swiftly as possible. Why would immediate removal of a psychological blockage be a threat to the organism?
Well, it really comes down to how the autonomic nervous system adapts to chronic stress and trauma.
Okay, walk me through that.
When a severe psychological problem takes root in the subconscious, the nervous system doesn't just passively store it like a file on a hard drive. It builds an entire compensatory architecture around it.
So it adapts to the weight of it.
Exactly. The trauma becomes load-bearing. The individual's vagal tone, their default sympathetic or parasympathetic states, their hormonal baselines, all of these recalibrate to accommodate the presence of that trauma.
Oh, wow. So if an intervention were to instantaneously vaporize that core trauma, the entire compensatory structure would just lose its foundation.
Right. The physiological scaffolding would completely collapse.
That makes so much sense. You would trigger a massive sympathetic nervous system overload.
Exactly. The brain has spent years, maybe decades, allocating resources to manage the specific frequency of that trauma. If the trauma is suddenly absent, the nervous system interprets that sudden vacuum not as relief, but as an acute crisis of unpredictability.
Like, wait, where did the threat go? What is happening?
Exactly. The systemic shock could manifest as profound destabilization, severe anxiety, or even a complete loss of identity coherence.
It makes me think of unknitting a highly complex sweater. If you find a snag and try to yank the entire thread out in one aggressive motion, the structural integrity of the garment is just destroyed.
Right, you ruin the whole sweater.
You end up with a tangled, useless pile of yarn. The tension in the sweater was actually holding the shape together, even if the shape was flawed.
That is a brilliant analogy.
Thanks. To change the garment safely, you have to follow the pattern backwards, carefully unknitting it loop by loop, row by row. Osman's onion metaphor implies that the duration of the healing process is actually a built-in safety mechanism.
The gradual nature of the process is absolutely non-negotiable in his framework. The transcript notes that removing the problem happens in gradations.
Gradations, right.
As one layer of the subconscious onion is peeled back, or, as one row of the sweater is unknitted, the autonomic nervous system is given the opportunity to restabilize.
It gets time to catch its breath.
Yes. The vagal tone adjusts. The neuroplastic pathways begin to rewire without triggering the amygdala's alarm system. The gradual exposure allows the body to safely metabolize the released energy without systemic shock.
You know, it ties perfectly into Tony Robbins' concepts of neuroassociative conditioning.
Oh, completely.
Like Robbins talks about how you have to interrupt the old pattern and then condition the new one, but you have to manage the physiological state changes carefully. You cannot just rip the identity away without building a new framework, or the nervous system will just freak out.
Exactly. And even in classical traditions, like Swami Sivananda's teachings on classical yoga Vedanta, Sivananda emphasized that practices like pranayama breath control are fundamentally about nervous system regulation. You build the capacity of the nervous system slowly so it can handle higher voltages of energy or deeper releases of trauma.
Right. But here's the thing. If peeling the psychological onion is as delicate and potentially destabilizing as Osman claims, you would naturally expect a high failure rate, or at least a highly variable one.
You would think so, yeah.
Because the sheer complexity of navigating someone's load-bearing trauma layer by layer sounds incredibly fraught. Yet he claims the exact opposite. He introduces a statistical claim that forces us to completely reevaluate the efficacy of these ancient sciences.
He does.
He asserts that when using the proper yoga sciences under a qualified teacher, the chance of successfully resolving these deep subconscious problems is over 90%.
Yeah, that 90% figure is really the pivot point of the entire transcript. And he immediately contrasts it with his assessment of standard medical science.
Right.
He states that, from his knowledge, the success rate in general medical science for resolving these specific, deep-seated psychological issues is around 20%.
20%? Wow.
Now, Osman is transparent here. He notes this 20% is not based on, massive scientific data that he's presenting in a journal, but rather his own experiential perspective. But the gap between 20% and 90% is just astronomical.
It is massive. We have to analyze what those numbers represent in terms of systemic outcomes. Because, wait, a 90% resolution rate, I really have to push back on that heavily.
I think anyone would.
In the world of complex, treatment-resistant psychological trauma, a 90% total resolution rate sounds mathematically impossible under our current models of care. Is he redefining the word resolution just to pad his statistics? Or is he genuinely claiming a mere universal cure for issues that the psychiatric community struggles to even stabilize?
Well, to understand that 90% claim, we must rigidly define the difference between management and resolution within his framework.
Okay, let's break that down.
We know that the standard allopathic model relies heavily on symptom management. The application of SSRIs, anxiolytics, or targeted cognitive behavioral frameworks, it is often designed to elevate the patient's baseline functioning.
Right, to get them through the day.
Exactly. The goal is to modulate the neurochemistry and provide behavioral tools so the patient can withstand the underlying trauma without collapsing. The trauma, the core of the onion, often remains, but its impact is buffered.
Right.
So Osman's 20% figure likely reflects his view of how often the allopathic model actually reaches the root cause and completely eradicates it, rather than just managing the downstream effects.
Okay. So in his view, the medical model is highly effective at treating the symptom, but structurally inefficient at clearing the source code of the problem.
Yes, exactly. And his 90% claim completely discards the management model in favor of total eradication.
Total eradication.
When he uses the term resolving and talks about clearing the blockages, he is talking about a fundamental restructuring of the subtle energy body.
Which goes back to that blueprint we were talking about.
Right. In the yogic sciences he is referencing, if the specific energetic knot, the blockage, is completely dissolved through precise methodology, the downstream psychological symptoms simply cease to exist.
Because their power source has been cut.
Exactly. He is claiming a 90% success rate in cutting the power source.
That completely reframes the expectations of recovery. I mean, if you are operating under the assumption that a psychological burden can only be managed, your entire therapeutic strategy is defensive.
You are just playing defense, yeah.
You are building walls to keep the water out. But Osman is proposing an offensive strategy. He is saying that with the correct, highly advanced energetic technology, you can simply drain the ocean.
That is a great way to put it, drain the ocean.
And he emphasizes that he considers this a strictly scientific approach. I think that is important. To him, 90% isn't magic. It is just the natural consequence of optimizing the human biofield.
Right. He argues that modern lifestyles systematically deplete natural bodily energies, creating vulnerabilities.
Yeah.
And his structured protocols just systematically reverse that depletion.
But the delivery mechanism for that technology is where the transcript gets incredibly granular, because he outlines two distinct pathways for achieving this resolution, and the divergence between them is fascinating.
Yeah, he uses a very modern structural analogy to explain the transfer of this healing.
Yeah.
He divides the methodology into what he calls snail mail and email.
Snail mail and email, okay.
The snail mail method represents the traditional active pathway. The individual connects with an advanced teacher, learns the specific yoga and meditation sciences, and physically and mentally executes the practices themselves.
Snail mail requires agency. It requires the patient to have the cognitive bandwidth to understand an instruction, the physical discipline to sit on the mat, and the conscious willingness to confront the layers of their own onion.
Right, it takes time.
The healing is generated internally over time through dedicated friction. It actually reminds me of Paramahansa Yogananda's Kriya Yoga science.
Oh, absolutely.
Yogananda wrote extensively about energy manipulation and these metaphysical principles where you systematically direct life force to transform the body and mind. But you have to do the work. It is an active daily practice.
Exactly. Snail mail is Yogananda's Kriya Yoga. It is building the internal capacity. But then Osman introduces the email method, which completely circumvents the patient's active participation.
And this is where it gets wild.
The email method is where his earlier claim of telepathic capabilities is fully operationalized. He states that a master-level healer who has already developed the requisite energy can transmit that healing directly to the individual, clearing the blockages remotely.
Just beaming it to them.
Essentially, yes. He specifically notes that this intervention is designed for scenarios where the person have a psychological problem so severe that they are not in a state of mind to follow instructions.
They cannot volunteer. They cannot submit to a protocol.
Right. They're totally incapacitated.
Let's drill down into the mechanics of that email transmission, though. If a patient's cognitive functions are effectively offline, if they are entirely non-responsive or trapped in a severe trauma loop, how does an external energetic transmission actually interface with their neurology? We're moving way past the sweater analogy here.
We are. If we look at this through the lens of biophysics and the concept of resonance, we can kind of map the mechanics of his claim.
Okay, let's map it.
Imagine a supersaturated chemical solution that is highly unstable and chaotic.
Okay, chaotic solution. Got it.
If you drop a single perfectly structured seed crystal into that chaotic solution, the sheer structural integrity of that seed forces the surrounding molecules to align with its pattern.
Oh, wow.
The entire solution rapidly crystallizes into a coherent form.
The seed crystal dictates the structure of the surrounding environment simply by being introduced to it.
Exactly. In this framework, the patient in critical crisis is the chaotic, highly unstable solution. Their biofield is highly disordered, which is manifesting as severe psychological paralysis.
Right.
The master healer, acting via the email method, acts as the seed crystal. The healer generates a hypercoherent, highly structured energetic frequency and transmits it into the patient's biofield.
And the patient doesn't need to consciously understand or accept the transmission for it to work.
Nope. Just as the chaotic liquid doesn't choose to crystallize, the introduction of the stronger, coherent frequency forces the patient's disordered energy to begin aligning with a stable baseline.
That answers how it works mechanistically, but honestly, it raises a critical question about resilience.
Such as,
Well, if you go the snail mail route, you are manually unknitting the sweater. You are building neuroplastic pathways, increasing your own vagal tone, and developing a profound, intimate knowledge of your own psychological architecture.
right, you are doing the reps.
Exactly. If someone simply emails you a coherent frequency and forces your system into alignment, haven't you bypassed the exact friction required to build a resilient system? I mean, you might be clear of the blockage today, but you have no internal mechanisms to prevent a new blockage from forming tomorrow.
That is a very valid critique,
Yeah.
but Osman actually anticipates that exact vulnerability in the text.
Oh, he does.
Yes, he doesn't present the email transmission as a permanent standalone cure that absolves the patient of future effort.
Okay, that is an important distinction.
He specifies the exact operational goal of this remote transmission. It is to, quote, at least bring the person to the level where they can understand and communicate. The energetic transmission is a triage mechanism. It is designed solely to elevate the patient out of the acute crisis zone and up to a baseline where cognitive function returns.
So it's an energetic bridge. The transmission doesn't finish the race for them, it simply puts them back on the starting line.
Precisely. Once they are brought to a level of communication, he explicitly mentions they can then start counseling.
So the external energy clears the immediate paralyzing obstruction, allowing traditional conscious therapeutic models to finally gain traction.
Exactly. This demonstrates a highly pragmatic view of human recovery. He is using advanced energetic techniques not to replace active participation, but to enable it when it has been lost.
Which brings us to the most surprising pivot in the entire transcript.
It really is a hard pivot.
We have spent this deep dive exploring telepathic energy transfers, seed crystals, and non-local interventions that claim a 90% success rate. You would expect a practitioner operating at this level of energetic mastery to just dismiss the traditional medical establishment as obsolete.
Right. A lot of alternative healers do exactly that.
But Osman introduces a rigid, non-negotiable mandate regarding allopathic medicine that forces these two paradigms into a strict symbiosis.
It is the most grounded physiological observation in his entire framework.
I agree.
Despite his absolute confidence in the yoga sciences, he includes a mandatory directive. Anyone with a medical condition must consult a licensed medical professional.
He does not mess around with this point.
He explicitly states that his all-natural therapies are not a replacement for medical treatment, but must be done in conjunction with it, and he provides a highly specific biochemical rationale for this rule.
He zeroes in on the reality of psychiatropharmacology. He points out that patients dealing with severe psychological problems are almost always on heavy medications. He states that these medications, quote, can't be removed immediately, need to be weaned off, or the doctor has to make a decision.
This is where we see the absolute limitation of energetic intervention and Osman's recognition of it. Let's look at the pharmacology for a second.
Let's do.
When a patient takes an SSRI or a powerful anxiolytic for an extended period, the physical architecture of the brain actually changes. Receptors downregulate or upregulate to accommodate the constant presence of the synthetic chemical.
The physical neurobiology becomes structurally dependent on the medication to maintain equilibrium.
Exactly. The brain has literally rebuilt itself around the chemical scaffolding.
Right. So now let's say Osman performs the email transmission or the patient completes the snail mail protocol. The subconscious blockage is cleared. The root cause of the trauma is resolved at the energetic level.
The power source is cut, as we said earlier.
Right. The patient may no longer possess the psychological disorder that necessitated the medication in the first place. However, the physical receptors in the brain are still physically adapted to the presence of the drug.
That is the danger zone.
If you abruptly withdraw the medication simply because the energy is clear, the patient will suffer catastrophic chemical withdrawal.
The physical biochemistry lags behind the energetic reality. The biofield might be pristine, but the physical brain tissue is still screaming for the chemical it expects.
You cannot telepathically negotiate with a downregulated serotonin receptor.
No, you absolutely cannot. It requires time, and it requires precise chemical titration.
That is the exact mechanism Osman is respecting. He understands that dissolving a psychological blockage does not instantly rewrite physical tissue density or receptor adaptation.
The weaning process is a strictly biochemical operation. It requires a physician to monitor half-lives, manage withdrawal symptoms, and safely step down the dosage as the brain slowly realizes it no longer needs the chemical support.
Osman's statement, "At the end of the day, a doctor still has to decide," is an acknowledgement of the absolute sovereignty of physical biochemistry in its own domain.
It is a phenomenal demonstration of integrated healthcare. The energetic intervention handles the source code, the root trauma, the subconscious blockage operating at that 90% resolution efficiency.
But the allopathic medical professional is absolutely required to manage the hardware, the physical brain, the neurochemical dependencies, and the safe transition of the physical body into this new, cleared reality.
It forces us to ask whether our current medical models are failing, not because they are inherently flawed, but because they are being asked to solve energetic problems with biochemical tools.
Osman is proposing that true efficacy requires assigning the right tool to the right layer of the organism, the yoga sciences for the energetic and subconscious layers, and allopathic medicine for the dense physical and chemical layers.
When those two forces are aligned, rather than positioned as adversaries, the potential for human recovery scales exponentially.
We have covered massive ground today. We started by dissecting the friction between telepathic capabilities and critical care, establishing a framework where non-local interventions address severe energetic dissonance.
And we explore the autonomic nervous system's response to trauma, understanding why the rapid removal of a psychological load-bearing wall, the center of the onion, can trigger a dangerous systemic collapse.
We analyzed the profound shift from a medical model of symptom management, sitting at a 20% success rate, to an energetic model of total eradication, claiming a 90% resolution rate.
We broke down the mechanics of the email versus snail mail pathways, looking at how a highly coherent seed crystal of energy can reorganize a chaotic biofield to bypass conscious paralysis.
And we grounded all of those advanced concepts in the rigid biochemical reality of neuroplasticity and pharmacological dependence, proving that true holistic healing requires a strict symbiosis with the medical establishment.
It is a dense, highly technical map of human recovery.
It really is. And it leaves us with one final structural implication to consider. Throughout this discussion, we have analyzed Osman's email method, the remote transmission of coherent energy to a patient in crisis. We have looked at how it forces realignment in a chaotic biofield. But if we accept the mechanics of that intervention, we must accept the reality of the medium it travels through.
The substrate itself.
Yes. We operate under the intense psychological assumption that our minds are closed systems. We believe our subconscious traumas, our anxieties, and our psychological blockages are isolated anomalies trapped entirely within the physical boundaries of our individual skulls.
But if a practitioner can identify, access, and untangle your specific subconscious blockage from a remote location, it means your mind is not a sealed vault.
Exactly. It implies that the human subconscious is perpetually interfacing with a shared, non-local, energetic network.
The implications of that are staggering. It suggests that our deepest psychological pain isn't just a private, internal misfire of neurons.
It exists as a tangible frequency in a broader field, a field that is accessible, mutable, and shared. It forces us to reconsider not just how we heal, but how fundamentally connected we are to the architecture of the space around us.
It really does.
We are going to leave you to process the weight of that concept. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the mechanics of the mind, and to borrow the closing thought from Osman's own framework, take care of yourself always.